Buddy, hello Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay, so this game I finished about 5 minutes ago with a win for the black pieces. That's me. Let's take a look at what happened. Standard king's pawn opening, and we have the Italian game defined by the move 3 bishop c4. I responded in book fashion with bishop c5, and after pawn to c3, knight f6, my opponent played d4, which is a strong move. I recommend this move for white, and I think there's only one good way to respond, really, in my opinion, and that's e takes d4, then c takes d4, and bishop to b4 check. This check, bishop to b4, the fact that it's check buys black just enough time to skate away from this thing, my friends. And knight to c3 is a book way to simply block the check, and once the king is castled, the knight will no longer be pinned. Knight takes e4 to capture a pawn. It's not a full pawn. White will have a lot of compensation for the pawn, but it's a book move that puts pressure on the c3 square by both the knight and the pre-existing pressure from the bishop. Now castles kingside, and bishop takes c3, b takes c3, pawn to d5. Show that black does get some play here, as well as we mentioned, the extra pawn from I think it was captured on e4 a few moves ago. Rook to e1 pins the knight. It's really desperate for black to castle, so black castles right away. And now this opens up some threats, like the existing hanging bishop on c4 is now actually threatened by the pawn at d5. There's a threat against c3 from the most central knight at e4, and then there's other sort of secondary threats, not necessarily material, but bishop g4, placing the knight on f3 into a pin against his queen, is very serious. Those would be the most serious threats on the board, and there are a number of them. So I feel black, in addition to having an extra pawn, might even have some compensation beyond that. Now white, for white's part, has an awesome rook looking down the open e file, looking down the open e file. This bishop can maybe go to b3 and exert himself along the a2 to g8 diagonal. The bishop might also drop to d3 and put more pressure on this really powerful black knight at e4. And there's some developing moves being made. I like bishop a3 as a shot against black's f8 rook. So it's a really dynamic position, and I think overall black is doing well. So bishop d3, knight takes c3. We're grabbing more material while also attacking white's queen. And I see that now black is judged to be 1/10 of a pawn better. So the computer, or the AI, thinks that white will regain some of this material. Probably that's probably the way to pan out. As opposed to quadrupling pawns or something that might be equally as valuable as 2 full pawns of material. So let's see. And the queen moves to c2 and forms a very powerful battery against the pawn at h7. In fact, there's an immediate threat of bishop takes h7 check, forcing the king into the corner, but also grabbing a pawn on h7 and making things a little bit less tidy here on black's king side. Knight to e4 is required to break up the power of this battery. And now here I was expecting bishop takes e4, not expecting, but I was thinking bishop takes e4, and after pawn takes e4, you know, white can capture with the queen on e4, the rook wouldn't be crazy there, but if I recall correctly, that the knight on e4 is kept there for a number of moves. Let's consult with the analysis page here. Looks like bishop takes e4 is indeed the correct move, and queen b2 or rook b1 are secondary moves that just aren't as good. This is the move for white, and hence the designation of knight e5 as a miss. Capturing on d3, and I'll have a whole piece worth of pawns as a difference in material. Black is doing well. Queen to b2, putting pressure on the undefended knight at d4. I'm thinking, in retrospect, I know I didn't play this in game time, but pawn to c5 would have been strong here for black. It didn't occur to me till now. The blunder, queen to f6, gives away a full knight. Instead of my calculating. Yeah, no, just sometimes you visually miss something. I would have liked to have played pawn to c5 here, but queen to f6 and grabbing them a full knight on d4. Black is still alive, right? We're not doing well anymore. We're actually doing poorly. The old tendency, old Jordan would capture on f2 immediately. I'll just say, well, maybe, who knows, right? But this Jordan knows that capturing on f7 is followed by queen takes, or capturing on f2 is followed by queen takes f2, and knight takes f2, king takes f2, and now black really is in a hole from which he cannot climb out. Rook to e8, pawn to f4, supporting the knight. The pawn cannot be captured, for the bishop is already covering that square, so white's doing well now. That move c5 should have been played a lot earlier, and instead played it here. Bishop f5. Yeah, I mean, just looking for tactics, really. After knight c3, can white avoid losing the bishop on d3? And if not, is there an attack on the e1 rook? Just trying to find something from what's given here. So a few moves, mostly probing for weakness here, but now all of a sudden black comes to life. Has an attacking force composed of 3 major pieces. There are some targets on the battlefield. Even the queen might be a target. So let's see what I can put together here. I played queen to h4 check. And now with the king moving to f3, rook f1 check, and king to e3 is gonna, just under the pressure here. The computer says that king e1 is so much, king e2 is so much better, and it's, well, why is that all that much better? So he's putting pressure on the rook at f1. If I want to solve that, I can't continue with other aggressive plans, and it's really the tempo against that rook that I think buys white just enough to skirt out of some of this disaster. Let's see, king to e2, queen to e1 check, king to d3, queen to d1 check, and maybe things get complicated for a while here. Looks like white's gonna be doing well. You throw together an attack, sometimes you cause your opponent to make a mistake. So anyway, the mistake here was king to e3, and I found queen to f2 check, picking up the queen on c5, and now black has a lot of extra force. Can he do it in just 52 seconds? Bishop to e3 to try to attack my queen, but then giving this intermezzo check on a3 against white's king. Once white has responded to that threat, then black can pick up the rook on a1, great for having even more material, but also now the rook and queen are almost exactly rightly lined up for delivering checkmate, and that will happen soon. And we see here that this is technically a mate in 5, checkmate in 5, as the evaluation bar reads out. So I played rook to a2 check. The king moves to a valid square, and then picking up or capturing the bishop on e3. We're keeping also alive the checkmating sequence. Rook to c1, and it's checkmate on d2. Queen to d2, checkmate. Of course, also checkmate. Another checkmating move would be rook to d2, checkmate. Okay. This is why I do this. I'm sort of dealing with my day and my situation. I'm really glad to have a forum on which I can play these chess games and broadcast these chess games. So with that in mind, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.